Okay, I think the first session is by me. I will just share the glance Etherpad. Everyone is aware what I'm discussing about. So this is regarding a very old OSSN where we have these two config options in glance, the show multiple locations and the other one was show image direct URL. So these were found to be concerning because they expose certain information that are not good to be exposed to end users, usually not non-admins. So what I was so the point of this discussion is till that OSSN holds valid for the current stores, and if yes, then we can work on a new API to a new admin-only API for exposing that location information. So just want to discuss that.
I think that OSSN is still valid, even with multiple stores as well.
I had some questions about this OSSN. I was trying to kind of figure out what this. So it looks to me like the dangerous part in the OSSN is the setting and deleting locations, right? But Cinder doesn't need that for the SEF optimization case, which is, I think, what we're interested in here. Is that right?
I think Cinder needs set location, and for setting the location, that show multiple locations options need to be enabled.
Why does Cinder need to set the image location? Do we do that currently?
At the moment, Cinder is not using it, but there is one feature on which Rajat is working on. It will act as a copy on write, and that requires if both Cinder and Glance are using same RBD backend, then it will do the copy on write, and that will require setting the image location in that case.
Okay,
And, yeah, so there is an upcoming feature.
So in Rajat's new optimize upload change, we do the RBD clone in Cinder, and then we tell Glance to set the location of the new image from our side. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And for that purpose, the deployments required show multiple locations needs to be set, and which is a vulnerability as per OSSN 0065.
In that context, it sounds like it is, but we currently use show multiple locations to, or is it the show direct URL part that we use currently to optimize the other direction?
Well, you need to have both for it, especially with multi-store, because you need to figure out what is the correct location you are actually looking at.
So I guess for the create volume from image, sorry, I was just saying, like for the create volume from image from RBD to RBD, we use this parameters, but we don't set any location glance currently.
Right, and what I was trying to get at here is that for the optimization that we already have implemented in Cinder, we don't need to make a new API to do this, right? But for the case for Rajat's new change, we do.
I guess yes.
Well, I don't think you need the new API even for that, because Nova is doing this already with the current settings in place and that OSSN in place.
So if the Glance team has information about like what is the approach Nova is using, or maybe I can later look at the code there.
So basically, I guess if Nova is doing copy on write, then it is setting the location in the glance, and for that purpose, it requires that config options to be enabled at glance site.
Yeah, but that's still again a vulnerability issue. Is Nova writing or removing any location from Glance? Is
Yeah, I just looked in their code, and they actually have an add location call that says you have to have show multiple locations turned on.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. So I guess they are documenting that this is the vulnerability. If you want to use this feature, you should be aware about this vulnerability.
To be clear, we ship with this turned on in our product, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So how do we square that with it being a vulnerability?
We just basically ignore it.
That's what my point was to bring this topic. If we could make a new API to expose these locations via an admin-only API, then I think in the OSSN it's clearly mentioned that we should not expose these details for non-admins. That API will be helpful in both Cinder and Nova use case, and we can remove the warnings we have currently.
So that will cause even bigger problems, because now you need to have admin credentials saved into your config files. That is one work that we have been trying to push away for ages. So you don't want to have admin-only API that is triggered by user actions, because that means that then you need to have those admin credentials saved in your service configs so that you can access that admin API.
Yeah, and we do that between Cinder and Nova currently. I don't know why that's a problem.
And even
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just saying, like, there is a new Keystone role as well, like it's upcoming, it's not implemented yet. For the service interaction, that could be helpful in this scenario for the service to service interaction. But yeah, for Nova and Cinder interaction, we do use the config group for Nova credentials, and we don't find any issues with that, as Eric said.
Well, to be clear about the concern, we don't store credentials in the Cinder config, right? Don't we store enough information to know which service user to use? I don't think we actually store credentials for it.
I will need to check, but I guess you're right.
So presumably that same model would work fine between Cinder and Glance, because I think it works well currently between Cinder and Nova.
I guess we should have a spec first for it with actual details on how we are going to do this. And then we can discuss the aspect on the spec itself. Because at this moment it is only there, and we are just speculating the things. But if we have a spec with actual implementation details, then we will be having a picture of how we are going to do this, and whether it is really beneficial to have this API or not.
Yeah, sure. I can write a spec. I just wanted to get the approval if people agree with this approach before
So
writing down this.
yeah, my biggest problem is I really don't understand why this is needed and what benefit it will bring versus what we are doing now between Nova and glance like why this is problem with Cinder, why it's not problem with Nova.
Yeah. So
Well, that was
basically,
kind of the same question that I was asking a minute ago. I mean, I think the answer is that if this OSSN is a concern, we're currently just ignoring the part that's a concern in the Nova case too, right?
yes. So
Yeah,
basically, what he is suggesting, like if we have this API, then we can get rid of this OSSN, and Nova will also adopt it rather than just ignoring this vulnerability. That is what he is suggesting, I guess.
yeah, because I've seen people complaining about it. Like this is a warning for every deployer operator, and they're not sure like if they should ignore it or take it seriously. We have
Mhm,
seen people complaining in the mailing list as well
mhm.
about this. So if this is actually a concern and we are ignoring it, then it's not right, and we should work on something towards fixing that. But if it's not a concern and we should just ignore it, then the OSN part is not valid now.
It is still valid, but we are just assuming that we are alerting the people that this is vulnerability if you enable this option in your deployment.
Yeah, so I don't think the concerns on this are any bigger than concerns of saving admin credentials on your configs. But on the same time, like Yuresh mentioned, the service token work from Keystone, we've been basically waiting for service tokens since this OSSN was released to be able to fix this on any other way than deploying a service-specific Glance API nodes that are basically facing Cinder and Nova versus public-facing that just don't have those options enabled for users.
When do we save credentials and configs?
Well, if you are making admin-only API, you need to be able to authenticate with that API somehow, meaning you need the credentials for it. The user don't have admin credentials to provide you that you can pass on to the next service.
If I remember correctly, Cinder does this currently without storing credentials in a config file, I think.
And that is why I'm saying like we should have this spec, and it will give us some clear picture. And Rajat, when you write the spec, do mention all these information you just shared, like the concerns on the mailing list, if possible, as well.
We
Yeah,
seem
sure.
to be storing in Cinder the credentials for a specific user. In the Nova section, we store a password, a username, an authentication URL, interface, auth type,
Okay,
everything.
so we do store a password in there currently.
You know, guys, I think it's kind of like wrong way to think about this, if I may. A service has its own identity which is used for things like talking to Nova when it wants, right? Currently, it's Nova specific, but it really shouldn't be. I think it should be a Cinder identity for which we do store credentials, yes. And then this identity can be assigned roles that allow it to talk to Nova and also serve as a role to talk to Glance, right? It's only one password in a config file, yes.
Yeah, sounds more reasonable to have a single one as a Cinder user that then can do multiple things as necessary.
So the whole idea of the service tokens were that they would be well, yes, you need credentials for that so that you can actually get the service token from Keystone, but they would be a just identification that this is service talking on behalf of the user. So that wouldn't be your admin credentials to your whole cloud. It's just for you to tell that, hey, I got this user request, but I'm not the user directly with your client. I'm a service X, and I need something more than the user would need directly. And it would need to be always a valid combo of valid user token and valid service token to move forward with that. And that way you wouldn't have just admin keys hanging on the nail on the wall for the whole cloud. And that's something, like I said, we've been waiting for years and we've been promised for years to solve issues like this. And so far, like what comes to the OSN 65, what we have been able to say for years is, if you are concerned of the vulnerability that is identified on that OSSN, you should really deploy a specific set of Glance nodes for your services to access that has those options exposed, and the public-facing nodes that don't have. That's really like those are, in my point of view, the two reasonable ways to go. Like, as soon as we get service tokens, we can literally right away flip that whole location stuff to be behind service token only, and all of these issues would go away. Unfortunately, just we haven't got there.
So if I remember correctly, I think Nova helped solve some of these concerns by providing some APIs on different endpoints. So they have the admin and the user endpoints like everybody. But if I remember correctly, they also have an internal endpoint that they can expose kind of, operations kind of like this, where services need to talk to each other that aren't necessarily an admin endpoint or an admin required operation. I think that they created another endpoint for this kind of thing, just to be able to restrict access in that way as well.
I don't recollect any of that API specific to internet.
Yeah, I'm not sure either, but so to be able to do that, you need to have something listening on a separate port so that you can actually firewall it off. It's not just endpoint behind this or endpoint behind the same entry point. You need to have a different entry point for that API totally.
Yeah, and that's what they do. They have it listed as like another endpoint in Keystone and everything.
Yeah.
I guess with the secure RBAC work, we can see the service load being implemented soon enough. They have planned it for AA as of now. But like if we want this to be implemented, for now we can go with the config option approach, and then we can later rewrite that particular part with the service role. Just wanted clarity on the action items for this topic. We should go ahead with writing a spec on it, or
I think you should write a spec with your current design. You can mention options like having service roles and this, if you're able to find this different endpoint thing of Nova, how it is doing, then you can mention it as alternative solution as well, and we can decide it there itself, like how much beneficial it is, with which solution we should go.
sure, that helps. I've noted down the action item and glance Etherpad.
Mm-hmm.
And if we are done with the discussion on this topic, then we can move ahead with the second topic. I'm not sure, like I have very less idea about this, so I don't want to drive it. Maybe Eric or Sophia, they have been working on it for a long time. If they want to add points to this.
Well, yeah, I've been working on this area. I'm not really sure what the desire is for what we want to cover here. Is this about this bug that's open here?
Yeah, it is about the bug which we have fixed, like and I think at that time it was suggested that we should implement the deferred deletion in glance.
Yeah, so I'll give you kind of the set the context here from a high level. So, I mean, this bug came out of Cinder work that's kind of still happening, but the main goal of the Cinder work we've been doing in this area is to fix all these situations where through different sequences of cloning volumes and cloning volumes from snapshots, you end up with images that depend on each other on the RBD backend, and then the result of that with our current implementation has been that you end up with Cinder volumes or snapshots that you can't delete, even though they should be, from a Cinder point of view, independent objects that you can delete when you want to. The reason that this comes up for glance is that Rajat, or at least the case I've been looking at most recently, Rajat's new work that we were just talking about to upload images from Cinder to glance with an optimized copy on write mechanism when you're using the same Ceph backend on Cinder and glance will introduce the same kind of issue there, where we need to make sure you don't end up with Cinder volumes that you can't delete because of glance images that are present. Maybe that's not the reason that we were talking about this for glance.
I think the main point was regarding. I'm forgetting something, but
I think there are situations currently where you can clone a Cinder volume from a glance image and end up with a glance image that you can't delete.
yeah, right.
Right.
Yeah. So that's not the new work. That's a thing that's been there forever. Yeah. So my thinking around this was that once we get this solved in Cinder, which is still actively in progress at the moment because the first plan for how we were solving this turned out to not work so well. We probably want to take the model that we use in Cinder and then go to Glance and figure out how to solve the same thing there so that whenever you clone Cinder volumes from Glance images, you don't end up with Glance images that can't be removed. I think is basically the idea of why we were saying that we would want to implement something in the RBD driver in Glance related to this. This is all also kind of confusing because everything is under the title of the RBD clone v2 support, but it turns out that just using the RBD clone v2 support doesn't solve all these problems for you, and there's more to it than that. So
yeah, there is lots more to it. and
yeah,
and
so the actual
quotas are not the least of those problems, because then comes the question: you are actually not freeing up the space, but you are not consuming your quota anymore, which is next step of problems that this approach will bring.
Yeah. So one idea that we're looking at in Cinder right now is to perform RBD flatten operations when necessary to break dependencies on the back end between the RBD images. If that ends up being the main way that we fix this in Cinder, then that should also resolve the quota type stuff you're concerned about in Glance, I think, because you don't end up with hidden copy on write images and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But we're still evaluating this in Cinder. I think it makes sense for at least some of the cases. One of the difficulties around this is we're currently trying to figure out how to come up with basically Tempest tests to test each combination of how you can clone and upload snapshot to all the different operations and make sure we actually cover all of them in testing, which is, they're not currently covered in Tempest. We've got some tests in flight to add coverage, and we're trying to, make sure we actually find all the different ways that this comes up. So my main thought is that we're aware that Glance store for RBD is going to have all the same kind of issues the Cinder side does. And my hope is that we can take what we learn from fixing this in Cinder once we're done with it, and then apply similar techniques to Glance to fix the same problems there.
Yeah. So just brief bit of history, like this was never problem in Glance until Ceph broke the backwards compatibility with the clone v2 support and hiding the fact that you can, or causing the fact that you can delete read-only snapshot without knowing that it has dependencies, and after you cannot delete the actual image after that snapshot has been deleted, and there is no way to get that snapshot back. So it was just like, until this, at least our users have been just like, okay, because it's using RBD backend and we get all these benefits, it's fine that we don't have the ability to delete these images. We get the error message and the image stays there and everything is peachy. So it really hasn't been a problem before. And I think the way Abhishek fixed this issue by going and just verifying that we fail it like we did, if there is dependencies on that snapshot, is kind of turning it into a not being a problem for us at the moment either, unless something new comes up.
Right.
Well, the problem with Abhishek's fix is that it leaves things in a state that work, but that assumes that you're okay with the notion that you can have glance images that depend on Cinder volumes. And I don't think that's how this is supposed to work. I mean, you should be able to independently delete volumes and images on either side without the other service interfering with that. And I think that is something we need to fix.
Well, that is kind of the selling point of Ceph, how it's sold to everyone that you don't need to have that data separated, but you can have these dependencies and kind of don't need to duplicate that data.
Yes. And we can still do that.
Yeah, and I totally agree that stuff like flattening the Ceph side when you want to break that dependency is probably the right way to go, not the way that we claim that we deleted, but we never deleted any data, but actually keeping the party holding that data accountable for it on quota purposes and all that. I think that's the right way to go.
Yeah, so I don't know that there's really an immediate action here. My thinking on this is that we should be closing in on fixing up the Cinder side pretty soon. And then once we actually know that everything there works the way that we want it to, I will probably take a look at what that would look like in Glance at that point. If anybody's itching to do anything, now, we can certainly talk about it, and I can try to help as much as I can, but I don't think anybody's been jumping to fix this, so that's kind of my plan at the moment.
I think we are good that are finding time on working on it, because we are short on hands to work on our own features. So basically, I'm afraid that we will be having enough time to independently work on this. But if you need any help, any kind of testing help, then you can definitely reach us. Guess that is how we can support at this moment.
Yeah, sounds good. And I think as we work through how we're going to test all this in Cinder, we may look at tests that would reveal how this shows up from Glance as well, just so we can kind of at least document the current state of all of it with the current work, even before working on the Glance side. Just because this has been a source of bugs and customer cases for basically ever since we've shipped stuff in our product. So it'll be handy for us to have a list of kind of how each part works and where it does exactly, or where it doesn't do exactly what you would want, and how to work around it and that kind of thing. So yeah, I'll take that action for now as the main driver from Cinder, and get back in sync with the Glance team once we kind of get things settled down on the Cinder side, I think.
Sounds good.
Sounds good. Rajat, you can also mention my name from Glance side if they requires any help from Glance team.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I guess we are in agreement with this as well. First, we will try to fix the Cinder side issues and then apply the same things to Glance.
Yeah, we can verify and apply the same things on Glance as per requirement. Right.
So I guess we are done with the topics, and people have
Yeah.
anything other than to discuss, like an open discussion?
No, so basically just to highlight here, like we have discussed earlier, your refactoring Cinder driver proposal, and we decided that we should also have a spec for that as well. So that will help us to understand how we are going to do it exactly.
And we also decided that we will move all the different connectors into their own library that is independent piece of work, and we call it Glance Brick.
Yeah, I mean, some of the idea was that only to refactor it. Yeah.
Okay, we can discuss it internally and then finalize the approach. That's it. I have doubted.
Yeah. Thanks for driving that discussion, and thanks for the update.
Okay, I guess if we don't have anything to discuss, then we will move back to Glance channel for 5 minutes for the closure of the deck.
Sure.
Yeah, I guess even for I will just stop the recording.
Yeah, and please update